All right, let's try it again. As soon as Ricardo jumps on, we'll add him in. Thank you, everybody, for coming back. Instagram wants to be nice to us today. Oh, it's not looking like it. Okay. Seems to be okay.
I mean, I can.
Let's see. How's your connection?
I don't see you.
I can hear you, yeah.
Real time. I can hear you too, but real time I see. Okay, I think we're better now. Go ahead and talk.
Okay. How you doing?
We'll just get
Still
used to
getting spinning. We'll go for it. Let's see. I'm going to pin this comment here. Okay. Shoot. I wonder if it's your connection. Sometimes it's Instagram. I always go off of my Wi-Fi because my Wi-Fi tends to be poor on this.
Is this better? You think this is better?
Yes. Yes. Much better.
Okay. There you go.
So how you doing?
Too much Wi-Fi traffic here in the house, I guess. So
yes, that's what's happening to me. I go off of my Wi-Fi because my son is watching a show and my wife's probably on her phone. So are you in Mexico?
When you multiply it by 3 children and a wife,
yeah,
and a few people that live here, so then it's the fight for Wi-Fi.
Yes, that's right. So are you in Mexico City right now?
I am.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And thanks for coming on. I know you are a busy guy doing many, many things, your hands in many different arenas, even now. So I appreciate you coming on.
Pleasure.
So why don't you do a introduction, who you are, where you came from, your history, so some of my followers that may not know you can learn who you are.
Okay. So I'm Ricardo. I went to dental school a while back, 30 years ago. I was done in 1990. And then 95, I was working as a GP for 5 years and was not doing it for me. I realized that I was very limited. So even though I had a practice that was growing and I was seeing patients, but I was just not doing the type of dentistry that I knew I could do. And so, it's because it's happened to you, it happens to many. It was just a matter of putting your life on the way it was, putting your life on standby mode and looking for avenues to learn more. And one thing led to the next. I applied to a bunch of schools, and one of the schools that I applied was University of Washington, and I was accepted, which was the single most craziest thing that ever happened to me professionally. It totally messed me up. It disrupted everything that I knew. It just rewired my brain in so many ways.
Yeah.
So I was there from 1996 till 2001 because I finished the program and then I stayed on as faculty. And right before September 11, we decided to move back home, which actually the July or early August actually of right before September 11, we came back here. And as you know, September 11 changed the way that we live.
Yeah.
We lived back then, kind of like what's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's another time in which we need to hit the reset button in so many ways. And I started practicing. I was working at a different practice back then, somebody else's practice. And because I had like the inertia of my training, and I was writing articles here and there, so I was starting lecturing. And that took off. Again, early 2000s, I started doing a bunch of lectures and writing. And then, the practice little by little, I started from scratch. So it was a practice that had nothing. So little by little, and I always say this, people don't know this, but Mexico City is one of the toughest places to start a pros practice. There are well over, I'm going to say close to 100 US trained prosthodontists plus.
Really?
Plus a bunch of very high-end trained prosthodontists that train here.
Yeah.
And as you know, this is a city, this is a country in which it has a polarizing society. And so you have a lot of people that can afford high-end dentistry, but you have a lot that can't. And so all these dentists are now fighting to make a name for themselves. Mm-hmm. So it was tough. It was tough.
Now you were at University of Washington at a special time. Why don't you mention, some of your co-residents that were there with you?
It's interesting. I've been teaching there for all these years.
Yeah.
And this last summer, I was there with the current grads. In fact, I was invited to come and lecture for their graduation. And we were having beers after a lecture, and I told these guys, this program, and my assumption is this happens everywhere else.
Yeah.
Right? But what happens in Washington is you guys are going to, look at your time at Washington back, and you're going to say, you guys were the best class that ever graduated, and you had the best people around you. So I can talk to you about the guys that were there when I was there, and clearly there are some big names, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that the same is going to hold true for those that have graduated years afterwards. This world changes, so you can.
It's so true.
Just like you are now, on the rise, and you're now, getting your gigs and you're lecturing, and you've carved in your path your way, in topics that are near and dear to you, and you're trying your best to. Well, just fast track things 10, 15 years from now, and you'll see newcomers that are going to say, oh, that guy's Stanley, he's kind of good, but he's passé. Now there's the new thing happening.
Yeah.
But it's going to happen.
That's true.
But, among the names of people that were there when I was there, you had Iñaki on board. I think he was one of your first live, at least in this series. So
Talmor was there with you, right?
Actually, no.
No?
I have to say, Tal's older.
Ah.
In fact, Tal's even older than Iñaki. When I moved to Seattle, Iñaki, Juan Jose Gutierrez, were just finishing off. So Iñaki had gone. From there, he went to Houston to do his
implant. Mm-hmm.
And Tal was there before. But when I was there, Keith Phillips was the director, who's amazing. Greg Kinzer was my senior classmate, who's unbelievable. He's probably one of the most gifted clinicians I've ever seen. Close to your neck of the woods, a couple of years behind me, Yoshi Goto was there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yoshi's probably, he has the most gifted set of hands that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Alex Shore, who's a brilliant mind, is also there. Jacopo Castelnuovo from Rome was there. One of those programs in which just people go through and you get a piece of everybody.
Now, why do you think so many, well-known, especially speakers came out of there? Did they push that into you guys? Did they have you guys speak? Did they, talk? I'm sure you guys did a lot of writing and publishing, but why do you think that happens? Because I saw the same thing come out of my residency. A lot of the guys that were in my residency ended up speaking a lot, becoming well-known in Brazil, and, writing a lot of articles. And that was really pushed into us was research.
Mm-hmm. Well, it has to do with inspiration. It has to do with mentorship. So first of all, the guy that put the program, the University of Washington program, in the world's map was our mentor, a guy by the name of Ralph E. Bayless. And I don't know if you probably stumbled into the book of Schluger and Udell, which is a perio Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So Ralph was the first, among the very first U.S. trained, dually trained perio and pros.
Okay.
So this guy finished his pros residency. That he went into perio with Schluger, who was like the icon, the super guru. And then he started running the program. And what he did, the claim to fame of the program was that he was very astringent when he picked up residents. And so he would lecture around the world. In fact, he was very close to Peter Scherer from Switzerland. So this is back in the day, Kyle, where, you know, the heyday of periopros.
And I think that's who Stavros was talking about, that was doing periopros back in Switzerland.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It had to be him. So bottom line, you had, you know, back in that day in the U.S., you had, of course, BU, Boston University, that also had a very big periopros component with the Kramers and the Nevins and all these guys.
Yeah.
You had, of course, Penn, and you had Marcus Blatz as well. I mean, these were like the programs. Granted, I mean, I can piss off others that have graduated from other programs, but back in the day, you know, the three schools that were really high on periopros, perhaps a little bit NYU as well, but bottom line, the three schools were, you know, BU, Penn, and University of Washington.
Yeah.
Especially because there was this duly trained, you know, mentorship happening. And so what Eudelis did was, you know, he really went after looking for amazing residents. Among them, he picked up big name, big gurus. Frank Spear went through that residency. John Coyce went through that residency.
Crazy.
I mean, he just snagged one of the bigger names. And so being that he was amazing, not only clinically, duly trained, but also as a speaker going around the world.
Yeah.
And going around the world doing a super cool thing, Kyle. Speaking about his students. And so he basically pumped his students to become somebody, not only clinically, but also teaching. And so you can only imagine what that did to, as I said, John Coyce and Frank Spear, who, in my mind, as my mentors, I don't think there are too many names as big as those two.
No.
When you talk about the impact they had in the world. So when I was there, they both taught us. You know, back then, again in the late 90s, they were no longer there as faculty at the U, but they had already their institutions. They started doing their own private teaching, so they would invite grad students to go to their courses. So on the one hand, you had Coyce that had, you know, his thing called Creating Restorative Excellence, when he had 30 people, and our class would sit down to his 3 days curriculum, which was insane. Not only seeing him teach, but also hands-on.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you a cool story that you'll enjoy hearing. So I was a grad student back then, you know, doing his sitting in the back of the room, doing his thing, and then he would clinically sit down with everybody around his cubicle watching him work, and he would do, you know, prepping, extractions. He would rely on a full arch provisional. Then he looks at me at the eye and said, "Ricardo, now you go to the lab and trim it. And when you bring it back to me, it's going in."
Oh no.
So don't mess it up. So this is a full arch shell with preps, with pontics, with implants, you know, the full nine on one arch.
Yeah.
Right? So he's asking me to go trim it to the lab, of course, with cameras looking at
me.
No pressure. And then, of course, a bunch of the students that are, you know, high-end dentists that are coming from all over. So you have this guy breathing in your ear, watching you as I'm concentrated carving, and the guy says, "Don't mess it up. You're gonna give it to me. It's going in.
I'm gonna put it in."
So that's kind of what I was exposed to with Coyce, who was like a huge influence.
Wow.
Then on the other hand was Frank Spear, you know, who then started doing his what's called his Seattle Institute workshops, but also he was the first guy that started doing hotel series, like bringing in a couple hundred people, the Westin in Seattle, and once again he would invite and support all the grad students to sit through those amazing days. And so, you know, every year we would take them. And so we became like Spear and Coyce's junkies. So it was almost as a default. You're watching these guys present at such a high end and, you know, take amazing pictures and put together information in a way. It was almost impossible not to be inspired and not to want to follow them.
I had the same experience with Pascal when I first watched him. He had such amazing pictures. His slides were beautiful. He could relate to an audience so quickly and get you to laugh, get you to think about what you're doing. And this is even as a student that I said, like, wow, I want to do that. you know. And then I learned that you can actually make money too doing it. I didn't realize that speakers actually got paid at first. So yeah, it was really inspirational. So that's how you got involved with Spear, was that early?
Well, yeah, that's how I initially got involved with Frank as a student.
Yeah.
But again, we're talking here late 90s, okay? And so then so what happened was Frank, he was in his practice in Seattle. He was looking for a partner.
Mm-hmm.
So basically he said, okay, I need to have the best guy join me in practice. So sure enough, where does he look for this guy? He looks for this guy at the University of Washington program. So who does he pick? He picks the right guy. He picks Greg Kinzer.
Mm-hmm.
So Greg joins Frank in practice. And back then, a little bit afterwards, Frank joins MTS Manji and they open up shop, Spear Education in Arizona.
Yeah.
So Frank is commuting and doing all this lecturing, and Greg is basically taking care of the practice.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, Spear Education grows at a way that, I mean, I've told you this before. You got to come and take a look at that. I mean,
yeah,
because you will find, my son, the Disneyland of dentistry. Nothing compares to that. I mean, as a campus, it's like surreal.
Yeah.
You have a couple hundred people working in the company.
Wow.
So that right there tells you the size of it.
Yeah.
You know, and so quickly anyway. So it starts growing up to a point in which, you know, seminars are happening, workshops are happening. Bob Winter also joins the staff, and you start getting like all these incredible rock stars joining. You know, Gary DeWood and Steve Radcliffe, and they basically put a dream team of a team.
Yeah.
You know, and they start like teaching all sorts. And then Darren Deester, whom you know also from UCLA, goes in as a full-time resident faculty, and Darren is amazing. And so incredible people are joining. So bottom line is I'm invited to come and lecture through Greg at the summit, and summit at Spear means 1,000 people. You know, and one of these like huge, I mean, you've been to the Seattle Study Club Symposium, something along the lines of that symposium, a little bit larger here. Thousands of dentists are there. And so bottom line is, they invite me to lecture. I present myself on perio, ortho, pros type of thing, which is what I do. They like it. They invite me back to lecture the next year. And then I get a call from Kaleem Manji, who's the CEO, who's the son of Imtiaz Manji, the mastermind that put this together with Frank. And they invite me to be a full-time faculty. I mean, through Greg's pushing, again, Greg being my older classmate, the one that knows me inside out, says, you need to come. So that's how.
So how often are you there?
I'm there once a month.
Yeah.
I'm there once a month.
Nice.
And so I teach at the campus, 2 different seminars. I teach with Greg and Frank, a seminar called The Art of Treatment Planning, which, as crazy as this may sound, buddy, I mean, this is the stuff that I saw Frank lecturing on 20 plus years ago back in the day. And I was like in awe. And it's like you're saying, you know, a crazy dream would be one day to be side by side lecturing with this guy. Sure enough, you know, you got to be very careful with what you dream, and you know this from personal experience.
I've had this stuff happen to me. Yeah.
And so I teach that, and then we have a 2-day seminar on, you know, one of my big topics is also the full arch reconstruction and implants, the so-called terminal dentition. So we put that seminar together, and I teach that with Darren Deester. In fact, we're teaching that in a couple of weeks. We do that a couple times a year. So
you
it's
have
a 2-day deal.
You have something coming up the end of this week, right? You have like a webinar or something.
That was pushed for the following week. This week. In a couple of days, we're doing the Strawman Virtual Symposium.
Okay, cool.
And the following week, we have this 2-day seminar. Yeah,
which
we're doing.
Where can people find out more about that?
Just on the Spear Education website.
It's on the Spear Education. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So do you have a case or something you can show us and we can kind of walk through? Do you have anything there?
I could. What do you want to see?
I would love to see like either complications or, you know, full arch treatment planning. I think those are things that people really need more of. And I think coming from your experience with periopros and, like you said, ortho, I think that is a really, really cool topic. Anything you can show, you know, my followers are going to benefit from.
Okay. Well, keep on talking while I look for something.
Yeah, that's fine. And you have multiple practices in Mexico City, right?
We have a couple of, well, we have one main practice.
Okay.
And you know, my partner is Jack Goldberg, whom you know
Yep.
very well as well.
Yeah.
And so, so yeah, we have our main practice here. And then what happened without even looking for this, you know, the second practice that we actually opened and we teamed up with, in fact, was one in Merida, which is close to Cancun. And this is,
okay.
You know, I'm not a multitasker guy. I'm trying to figure out what to open here to
That's
show
okay.
you.
That's
and
okay.
What to,
people will wait. People will wait. We've got plenty of time.
Okay, let me see what I can show you guys.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, the first case that you pull up, no big deal.
Okay, you know, this is not the full case here, but I'll just show you a couple of pictures here of, you said complications.
Yeah.
Right? And people don't talk much about complications.
Yep.
It's not sexy enough. And
but I feel like it's starting, people are starting to.
Mm-hmm.
And I always give credit to Joseph Kahn, because for me, he was the first one that really was like super humble on stage and showing cases that he published and took around the world and said, look how good I am. And then now he shows what they look like today.
Yeah.
And I love that about him. And I think it builds trust with your audience, and it shows that you're human, and people learn more from that than from saying, look how good I am.
You know, as a speaker, one of the most life-changing experiences for me was a time in which I went to this. I used to be a regular at the Seattle Study Club Symposium.
Yep.
So let me.
And if you want to turn your phone around, you can just double tap. Oh, there you got it. Look at you.
Okay, so you know, years ago, I was, as I said, there was this big. Let me see how far back do I gotta go? Probably like. So. Actually, nice. Let me push this. So anyway, that symposium, I don't know if you've ever been to one of those. I know you presented in some, but I
Seattle Study Club. Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to one in which the main topic is failure and complications. So
I haven't, no.
So that, you know, that was one of the coolest experience for me. I think it was 2000. I'm gonna say, man. Gotta look back, probably 2010. Anyway, he invites me to that big symposium, 3 or 4 days. The full symposium is on failure.
I love that.
And you have, you know, people from Galib Gurel, Iñaki, you know, Jerry Sheesh, probably Christian.
It's always a top lineup there.
Everybody speaking on failure, buddy.
Yeah.
And so the symposium name was Failure, a Road to Recovery. That was in the theme.
Nice.
Okay? So why was this such a life-changing teaching experience for me? Because, you know, it gives you months in advance so that you can plan out the event. And I said, okay, what am I going to do here? What can I do that's going to be meaningful? And you know, as a speaker, the only chance you have to make something meaningful for others is you make something meaningful for you. Mm-hmm. Because that's when you truly dive into, you know, that mode. I mean, when you are now lecturing on depression and the stuff that you've engaged upon, I mean, and again, I'm very frustrated that we had to cancel because I had you in the program for.
I know that would have been great.
But we will do it for sure. But what I'm trying to say is that the reason why your lectures, I'm sure, are very powerful, it's because they had a healing power on you to begin with.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't work. Otherwise, you know, it's just poetry. You're just saying things that you don't live yourself
believe
through.
In. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, or you're just following. You read a book on self-healing, but that means nothing to you.
Right.
You know. Well, same deal here. So I said, okay, I'm giving this opportunity to be real, because I was a younger speaker back then, and you know how it is. You present at those podiums, you got to show your best.
Yeah.
You cannot just show, you know, and when people say, oh, you know, I just got this case that I'm showing you, I don't know if it's going to be that great. Well, don't bullshit. I mean, you're showing your best.
Yeah.
And if you didn't get that, you got to show your best. Then you lost somewhere here in translation. You got to show your best, and your best doesn't really necessarily mean, you the best soft tissue, the best integration. Your best means, how did I think about this? How did I put together this concept? I mean, right? That's kind of the way it works. So the bottom line is, going back to this failure thing. I was like, okay, let me think failure. Finding a case where things didn't go well is not complex if you run a busy. If you have more than 2 patients, you can have one thing that didn't go the way you wanted. And you can talk about failure.
Almost every case, I look back and said I would have changed this or that.
What's really crazy about how people took it, and I'm not going to say names, but some of the speakers said, yeah, I'm going to show my failure. And they would say, look, they show this full mouth reconstruction, and sure enough, their big failure was the gingival margin of the 2 central incisors was not exactly equigingival. Come on, you know what I'm saying? So this case, it was a nice case, but for me, it was a big failure because it was not perfect. And so again, you have every chance to choose what it is that for you it's meaningful. So again, what I did was, and just to give you perspective of how seriously I took it, I invited my dad to come with me, and he'd seen me present a couple of times before, but I flew my dad. I was actually lecturing in California to a big osseointegration group. You probably heard of this group, because in fact it's got some folks from UCLA.
Okay.
Roy Yanase has this. It's one of the oldest study clubs in Southern California.
I know the one you're talking about.
Right. So I was lecturing to their club, and then I flew. This was January. I flew from there to the Seattle Study Club, which was in Key Biscayne, and I flew my dad from Mexico to join me there.
And is your dad a dentist?
No, not at all.
Okay.
My dad passed away now, but my dad was an immunologist.
Oh, okay.
But why was it so cool for me to have my dad there? Because I wanted my dad to see me comfortable talking about fuck-ups. I wanted my dad to see that I was okay talking about failure.
Yeah.
And your son is very young, and everybody that follows you, we all enjoy the pictures we enjoy the most are the pictures you post on your son. And I normally tell you that because I think it's so cool for you to post the amazing shots from your son. And you'll see that what you really want as a father is to make sure that when you're going to feel at ease is when you figure out that your son is okay falling and standing up, when he's okay, messing up and then picking up the pieces. And so that's kind of like what I did. I said, I wanted my dad to see me show failure and talk about failure. And so essentially I broke up the lecture. As you know, and whenever you're lecturing, you got to talk about 3 things. That's the pace, that's the flow. You talk about 3 things. So I said, okay, what are the different failure modes that we experience in dentistry? And I'll show the slides momentarily, but I want this to sink in first. So we fail threefold, my friend. We failed communication, which is a huge, huge, huge first failure.
I've been there.
We fail designing therapy.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't know what we didn't know, and we thought one thing would work, and we did it. And we fail executing.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't have a greatest day, and sure enough, man, I perforated the buccal plate. Whatever. Yep. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the 3 modes of failure, and if you think about this, I mean, it took me 3 months to figure this one out. So if you think about this you can extrapolate to any walk of life. We fail communicating, we fail planning, we fail executing.
Yeah.
Now, with each and every one of those failures, there are different repercussions, different implications. And so now let me show you this little case here. So this is gentleman. You know, you can notice here we've got a full arch implant supported prostheses, of course, on implants. Mm-hmm. And you know, there is a white component and a pink component, and there's a close-up view. And here's an occlusal view of the reconstruction. Right? So
beautiful.
We are on a bunch of implants. We are, I think we're on 6 or 7 implants, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And this looks beautiful. Day one looks beautiful. Day two looks beautiful. Year one. In fact, this case, I presented this at a previous ceramic symposium, quintessent ceramic symposium
nice.
in San Diego. I was talking about these type of restorations, and sure enough, I showed the case, and this patient is a bruxer. So he's a typical patient that broke provisionals on me, and you know how it is when they start breaking them provisionals. You have them like every other day.
It's a glimpse into the future.
Totally, and as you know, they break eating soft bread, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, sure enough, when I presented the case at the symposium, I showed a question mark, and I said, okay, this is not a happily ever after case. There's something that's going to give in this system. So what is it? What do I envision seeing this as a potential weak link? And something you probably are fully aware of, any mechanical system is as strong as its weakest link. Yeah. And so what do you have here? Well, I've shown you a full arch on implants opposing a natural set of natural dentition, okay, on a patient that I told you is a bruxer. The first thing the first way you know he's a bruxer, he's got this incredibly powerful masseters. The guy walks in and he looks like his face is like, you can tell it, totally. And so we planned him initially for implants in one sextant. He had some crown and bridge in the other sextant, and I said, we should treat you more comprehensively. You have large posts, you have wear. He says, no, I only want you to go ahead and work on this one area where I lost the teeth. And it's one of those things that happens more when you're a younger clinician, or happens more when you really want to do a case, or happens more when you let the patient persuade you.
I've been there. I'm thinking of all the patients that this happened to.
Of course, and I'm just throwing out there because I think it would be useful for you and your followers to listen to this.
Yeah. I'd rather have them learn from your mistakes and my mistakes than their own mistakes,
Sure. So bottom line is, I was persuaded to do just sextant dentistry, and sure enough, implants went in, and once we placed a provisional, you could bring Valco this side of the camera. It's okay.
He's asking me for a snack. Valco, ¿qué você quer? Get a snack? Okay, keep talking. I have my AirPods on so I can still hear you. I'm gonna go grab a snack.
Sure.
So
So
keep going. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so long story short, the patient, as I said, persuades me, and I just do a section of the bridge, and sure enough, once we're ready to repair, he comes, ready to restore, he comes in, and he now busts the full other side of the mouth, just as I anticipated was going to happen.
The teeth actually broke?
Yeah, I mean, they busted to the gum line with post, fracture post. So now, sure enough, a partial design becomes a full arch design. And so
this was when you were going to go to final?
This was when I was going to go to final on those implants, which was a good thing that I didn't go to final. That way I didn't have to, incur on the expense of already having that piece. But
right.
So I was in that sense lucky. And, it's when I tell the patient that the typical, I told you so. And you got to be careful when you go through that, I told you so, because, you never know how they're going to take it. But bottom line, he took it. Now his case became a full mouth reconstruction or full arch reconstruction and implants. And sure enough, once the implants went in, we did our prototypes with, reinforced metal. And sure enough, he was breaking that.
Wow.
And so, I told him, one day you're going to break the ceramics as well. You're going to break something. So you can do anything you want. You work with night guards and what have you. And the bottom line is, when I presented him in San Diego back then, I showed a question mark and I said, what is the weakest link of this system? How will something here give me grief? And so, you can talk about, what is it? Is it the abutment to implant interface? Is it the screw? Is it the ceramics? Is it the opposing dentition? Is it the actual osseointegration? And so what is the weak? You can think of all sorts of different things. So the bottom line, as I said, here's the occlusal view of this reconstruction, and this is what happened. I'm going to say somewhere between 4 to 5 years down the road.
Okay, so this was full contour zirconia with
This is
cut back and porcelain,
actually,
or just
yes,
full contour.
It was a minimal cutback, minimal facial cutback, but you see all the occlusals are full contour zirconia.
Yeah.
So where is the fracture? And this is very interesting because normally it's where you're going to experience a lot of these fractures. And in this particular case, the weak link is, we cement this big chunk of monolithic zirconia on these
tie bases.
Mm-hmm. So you'll notice here that, I mean, it's not like it's thin, but we could definitely thicken here from the palate and have a much thicker.
I had a case that same position, or no, that's the central. I had it break at the lateral. Right. Big, chunky, full arch case break right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, so again, by the way, I don't have it here, but I'm going to show some. This is an amazing pearl for your audience to show. So so the one thing is, let me just turn this around so you can see me for a second. So one thing is what happens, and then what do you do with what happens? So you go back to the 3 modes. You go back to communication, planning, and execution. And, 2 things that happened there that made this bad day not such a bad day. The first one was we had this conversation way before. Because if you don't have this conversation, then that's when planning becomes excuse.
Yep.
And when you do have this conversation, and this is why, I wrote an article a couple of years ago, it's very near and dear to me, because I just said somebody has to speak out. Just like you said, let's talk about depression. I said somebody has to speak out about this nasty lie that lives in everybody's mind, that implants are forever, or implant support restorations are forever. So I basically did some research, and I said, what the hell happens in other body part replacements? What happens with hips? What happens with limbs? What happens with eyes? What happens with breasts? And how do people that treat these patients manage these? And how do they communicate them? Because, you treat a bunch of patients that have hips that have been replaced.
Yep.
And when those fail, they know they'll fail. And they're going to go with their orthopedic surgeons, and they're going to say, okay, we need to replace this.
Yeah. I've even heard people say, well, I have to go back to my orthopedic surgeon because it's been 15 years. And they said after 15 years, we probably have to replace it. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And so if you think about that, why is this evil idea planted in our patients? And in many ways, I don't know if you have ever caught yourself saying this, especially when you started with implants. When your patients ask you, how long is this going to last for, doc? Oh, implants forever. I mean, I'm not saying you did, but probably at some point.
No, I did. And I think what that came out of was me, like you talked about it before, is me wanting to do the case, trying to get the patient, because I was young, giving them confidence in me.
Right.
And it was where I made some of my biggest mistakes, I think, earlier. And most of my biggest mistakes were communication. When I think about those 3 that you mentioned, most of them were communication.
Mm-hmm.
And this was kind of what caused me going into a dark time with dentistry, was dealing with the patients that I didn't have good communication with. And something happened that could have been my fault, could have been the patient's fault, could have just been biology, but I hadn't communicated that, so they weren't expecting it.
And so how did that change? What do you do now? How do you communicate things differently now?
Now, I wouldn't say I try to talk patients out of doing treatment, but I tell them every complication that can happen and say things like, if this happened to you, would you be okay with it? And especially knowing that you'd have to pay for it again. And we're very upfront. So we do what's called we call it a treatment agreement. So we have a consent form, which is like clinically, but then we also have a treatment agreement, which is like a multi-page agreement for big cases that talks about what complications could happen, how much they would cost to fix, how much we need to see you, explain the whole idea of fixing natural tissues and how they can be unpredictable. So we take a lot of time up front in our communication. It's really, really changed. When I think about how it used to be, it's like, oh yeah, implants are great and I'm really good at them. So like, yeah, let's do it.
And I have news for you, buddy. Now that as we're getting ready to get back to practice, you better believe that communication piece is going to change, because now the mindset of so many patients have changed. And you know, it's just something that I'm lecturing with Spear a lot, you know, and how do we connect with patients during lockdown? How do we expect them to come back? How do we envision, you know, rebuilding, getting back in business? You know, as business owners, we're like in the mud. And in many ways, we're kind of the lucky ones. You know, there's so many businesses that are really hurting. I mean, 30 million people unemployed in the US. 30 million? How is that going to impact? I mean, you live in California, in LA, Beverly Hills, you probably have a bunch of really wealthy patients, but some of your wealthy patients are also going to get hit. And they'll come back, and they're going to want to make sure that your dentistry prevails. They want to make sure that whatever investment they do in your dentistry is something that it really lasts. So again, that conversation piece has to be so important. So important.
Yeah, and if patients are going to be spending money, especially now, they want to make sure that's going to last as long as possible.
My assumption, though, Kyle, as I'm talking with you, and this it's cool because it's been the longest conversation we've ever had. We've seen each other in meetings and stuff, but we've never been
right.
So I know next time that we are there live, it's going to be incredibly engaging. But the bottom line is, put it this way: the way that you're wired, especially now being upfront lecturing on, you know, depression and lecturing on anxiety and all these things, right there sets the stage for you to have conversations with your patients at a totally different level. Because the one thing patients want the most, and by the way, I don't know if you do this at all, you probably do. And if you do, let me talk you out of it. Your patients don't give a shit that you are lecturing all over. Your patients don't care that you are one of the rising stars of dentistry in the US, blah, blah. Don't go there. Okay. The patients in the chair, they're already in the chair.
Yeah.
Don't be interesting. Don't be interesting. When I tell you failure in communication is a huge component, a lot of it has to do with being bad listeners and wanting to prove that you know a lot.
Yep. This was me at the beginning for sure. I mean, quoting research and this and that. And I learned, especially with most of my terminal dentition patients, like they just wanted to chew a salad or go to dinner with their friends and not have to go to the bathroom to take their denture out and clean it.
So actually, you know what? I just had a couple of images, but now I looked for the case, and here's the full case. So let me show you our friend.
Okay, cool.
So that we can have the whole page. So this is what I was alluding to. Look at those masseters.
Yep. Yeah, square face. Yeah.
All right. So this is how he shows up.
Ooh.
Class 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is how he shows up. As I said, only one section and busted.
Got it.
What do we see the other side? We see posts. See a little cantilever. A big split.
Those are all connected.
These are connected all the way to the central.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. And so now he busts this. So what do we do? Okay, so these are some of the questions that we ask. Can we stage treatment? How many implants should we place? How would we provisionalize? Are we going to go for immediate placement or loading? Are we splinting individuals, cement retain, screw retain, metal ceramic? I mean, I normally throw as many questions as possible to kind of figure out. And this is part of a framework that we've developed. I'll be happy to send you a link in which this is right here, the way that we break up pretty much, you know, all the different questions that we need answered. Like, are we dealing with a maxilla, mandible, or both? The etiology of why the patient is losing his teeth. Is it aesthetic, functional, structural, or biologic, the type of condition that we're going to end up with, the type of patient's compliance or behavior, and the patient's financial possibilities. So right here we have both clinical and personal information that allow us to kind of have a roadmap with him. And so we listen to the patient. What does the patient want? Patient wants function, and patient wants partial. You see, what does it say here? Go here. 1 quadrant at a time. So sure enough, we start by extraction and placing just in 1 quadrant some implants. As I said, the patient was on a provisional. Sure enough, he comes back and he busts the other side. Right? So now we're thinking, okay, we got to re-engineer this. And as I told you, fractured posts.
Are they gold posts?
Yes, sir.
Oh, wow.
So the dentistry was fine back then. I mean, to be honest with you, it was a very invasive dentistry that was done. Something that we, people like you and myself, try to stay away from at this point in time. But anyway, so what do we see? We see red flags all over the place. And when you see red flags, you got to think about 2 things. 1, the probability of occurrence of a problem. And secondly, the severity of the consequences. Right? So we have a full restorative roadmap in which we look at which system we're going to be utilizing, you know, the loading protocol, the type of provisional, the type of components. This is part of what we teach in that 2-day seminar. And so sure enough, now he becomes a full arch. So we have like a copy of the provisional, clear splint. So we now over-engineer him with a bunch of implants. Right? And we go for a fixed design. So here you can see the type, as I said, our metal reinforced provisional. Very nice, right? Looks beautiful, and yet, see how he's busting it. So this is telling of what he's going to be doing, buddy. Right? And so we know he's, you know, big time parafunctional guy. So what do we try to do as best? You know, we try to control muscle contraction. We try our best also to work on load distribution. We give him a prototype, and then we go, and here you can see, you asked about the design. See the minimal cutback? See the occlusals? I mean, this is pretty much very robust. Now, in hindsight, when you take a look at this right here, this is where he busted it, right? So you would have to go even more, you got to go thicker here to the palate.
Can I ask you a question? You had said controlling muscle contraction. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, all it takes here is to make sure that occlusion is not neglected.
Okay.
What do I mean by that? You gotta have, look at the occlusals. What do you think? What do you see about the occlusals in this design? They are as flat as it gets. Not cusps at all. So we do very shallow, very shallow guidances. You know, again, he's opposing natural dentition, so you want to give him a, you know, a mutually protective occlusion, if you will, or a very shallow, right? You don't want balancing contacts and a very shallow guidance. Again, that's what we know that's going to work as far as controlling, you know, the firing of those masseters and those muscles of mastication. Right?
Thank you.
So again, the other thing is here you can see the flat occlusion.
Oh yeah, that's a great picture.
See, from this view, and there's a great article. You probably know this article from Anselm, Wiscott, and Belzer from JPD 95. Talks about a rationale for a simplified occlusal design in restorative dentistry. It's an incredible paper. You should read it, and you should have your dentist.
I will. Followers. I'm gonna add it.
Oh man, this is a poem of a piece. Okay? So anyway, this is again what things look like, and you see beautiful ceramics, and this right here, and you'll notice in this intaglio again, we could have gone thicker here. Right. So again, happy day for this guy, as I said. See the change.
Wow.
You know, but this is part of my presentation back in that ceramic symposium. So this is how I showed the guy. I said, you know, we know what his problem is, and you can see red flag and red flag. The problem is that this guy, if you look him through and through, he's the Terminator. And I showed him this picture the day that I inserted the prostheses, right? So again, the weak links. What is the weak link here? We could think about, you know, framework design, abutment interface, abutment screw, osseointegration, the opposing dentition, you name it. So sure enough, as I said, 4.5 years down the road, this is what we see. And again, this was expected. And the way that this was managed is because we had this conversation with him, it didn't hurt so badly. And of course, I mean, the guy is like confronted with now, you know, having to invest more money to get this fixed. But
yeah,
which is something that would have been next to impossible to have this discussion had we did not, you know, address this before. So let me just give you an amazing pearl as far as preparing these type of things, because they work, at least for a nice period of time. So here's the reparation protocol. So you of course you have your master cast where this was fabricated to begin with. So you seat it back in place. Sandblast 2 bars of aluminous oxide, 11 microns, all surfaces. Silinate 1 minute per surface. Allow 5 minutes to evaporate. Apply bonding agent to both surfaces as well. Then utilize your dual cured cement, resin cement, and you put everything back together. And this is how it looks. You see, here is a very, very almost not of how the fractures meet. And again, you go
he's
back.
Very low lip line too, so you never see that anyway.
No, never sees that.
Yeah.
And Kyle, this worked. This was in his mouth for a year.
Nice.
Until we went ahead and we did the new prostheses. Here's the guy, which again, I mean, we did give him a break. The lab gave us a break, but he ended up paying for whatever, you know, the lab bill costed. This is not something that we should be paying, because if we don't have these discussions with patients and we're not upfront with them, then this could bankrupt you in practice.
Yeah, this is a big thing I talk about, and you brought it up with the medical industry, with hips and elbows and things.
Oh God, yeah.
That when we have problems with something in the medical industry, we don't expect them to fix it for free. But in dentistry, for some reason, I don't know where this came from, but we're always expected to just go back and fix it for free.
Yeah, and you know what I do is this article on the biggest dental eye, which I'll send you the link.
Please.
So you can have your followers if they want to have it.
Yeah.
It's something that I share with patients. I tell a patient, I wrote this article. I want you to read it because it's written in lame terminology, because that's how we need to speak with patients, so they get it. So just briefly show you, this is now the new prostheses. You can notice here how this was thickened.
Yeah.
And this is him now with the new prostheses.
And how did he do speech-wise and comfort-wise with that thickened
he did okay. Initially he complained, but then he adjusted, as most patients will adjust.
Yeah.
But again, being that he understood.
And he understood why, of course.
Listen, let me tell you something, Kyle. One of the biggest disconnections I had as a professional, doing what I do, and having this dual, you know, profession of being an educator and being in practice, and being a leader in practice, and having a large staff, and then coming home and trying to be somebody with my family, is you got to have clarity, and you have to be very consistent with what you do and what you say you do. There's got to be consistency. Because you can fool everybody you want, but you cannot fool yourself.
Yeah.
And so, you know, here I was lecturing all over the place, and I've been all over the place. And I had, back in the day, the most unmotivated staff in the world. And I lecture on this quite a bit. You know, and I started doing a lot of lecturing on team building. And I had to show, you know, my biggest failure, how my team was totally, you know, dismembered. And that's because I was not doing, not even the slightest job at educating my team. Here I was, the big speaker outside, and yet, you know, I almost thought that my team would know everything that I taught from osmosis.
You're taking things out of my head. I was the same way. Same way.
And so my life changed the day, as I said, that, man, there's got to be consistency. I need to teach my staff, and everybody in my staff has to become educators. So we all have solid information that we teach our patients. In fact, I just wrote a piece. I'll send you a copy. I think it's a pretty cool piece called, you know, and it's great on, again, based on the historic moment that we're living through, which has to do with rewriting our mission and vision statements for growth. I mean, you go to practice, if you don't have a vision or a mission statement, let me just wrap this up by just showing you this guy, and then we can talk about it. So anyway, this is him the day that we finished, and very unfortunately, the guy passed away a few months afterwards. So I did not get to follow up on him, you know. This was very unfortunate. He died of a heart attack. He looks
young, yeah.
I know, you know, he was in his I guess late 60s. Just had a massive heart attack and he passed away.
Wow.
But anyway, let's just wrap up and give you some ideas that hopefully they'll be useful for you, and if they're useful for you, they're going to be useful from whoever you talk with.
Yeah.
Because this is what we do. We create, you know, energy of concepts that we're able to make sure they're passed on. This is how you create some sort of a legacy in whatever you do. So the bottom line here is writing the mission and the vision. When I told you I would be somebody wearing one hat when I was lecturing, I would be somebody else in the practice. And back then, I was interesting. I was talking a lot about my lecturing. Oh, Mrs. Jones, let me just tell you, I just came back from Singapore. You know, these guys in Singapore, they're so amazing and have the greatest buildings. And Mrs. Jones is looking at me like, are you shitting me? Do I need to put up with this crap? And so then I realized, okay, things had to change. I got to rewire this whole experience. And if I am somebody that claims to be, so how can I say this? Years right before I joined Spear Education, I had a session with somebody that I call my personal guru, who, by the way, right now, believe it or not, as esoteric as this may sound, this guy now lives in a monastery in Nepal.
Oh, wow.
But he was my business coach. And this is a guy that, you know, as a business coach, he facilitated my partnership with Jack. He facilitated my growing for another practice. He facilitated the whole negotiation with Spear. The guy's a freaking genius. But now he wants to be a monk in a monastery in Kathmandu.
Wow.
So anyway, the guy wants, you know, we had a session. He says, Ricardo, who are you? He says, what do you mean, who are you? This is right before the time that I joined Spear. You know, I was like you kind of are right now, lecturing all over the place, trying to juggle. Yeah. And they asked me, who are you? I mean, what are you? What's wrong with you? What do you mean, who am I? You know who I am. No.
Ricardo, Instagram's going to cut us off. I'm going to end and come back so that we don't have to worry about time. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's end and come back. All right. We're back. I'm excited to hear this story. Let's see. Thanks everybody for coming back. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming back. Okay, let's bring the story. Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Keep going.
So where did you stay? Where did we leave it?
When he said, who are you?
Right. Okay. So who are you? And I'm like, what do you mean, who am I? Yeah. Who are you? So, well, I'm a dentist. Well, of course, write it down. You're a dentist. What else? I'm a family guy. Sure, write it down. What else? Well, I teach. You know, I'm an educator. Yeah, write it down. What else? Well, I don't know. I'm a social person. I have friends. Yeah, sure. And till the end, he almost like pushed it in, you know, or like, I don't know how he went in and he took it out of me, which was not under my radar, which was, well, I'm a businessman. So write down businessman. So I wrote all these things down, you know, and in a board, right? So then he says, look at them and prioritize them. What are you first? What are you second? what are you last? I mean, these are all things that are important to you. What are they for you? So for sure, number one is a no-brainer. Number one was, I'm a family guy.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most important thing in my life. I mean, as opposed to you posting on Valco and your wife, I don't post on my family in social media. It's something that I don't feel comfortable doing. I just, and I love the fact that you do it. It's just, you know, probably if I was living in Beverly Hills, probably be a different story. And, you know, I have people that I don't know who are following me. Just
yeah, no, I totally understand.
But the bottom line is, my number one priority, as I'm assuming is yours too, is I'm a family guy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was torn. Number two, what are you next? And I hesitated. Say, okay, if this exercise is going somewhere, I better be truthful. And I said, you know, what I really like the most, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy sharing what I do. So number two was educator.
Mm-hmm.
Then number three was a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
Then number four was social person. And at the very end, businessman, which that's when this guy said, okay, we need to fix you, because I'm not implying that businessman is not something that you should be your top priority, but you neglect the whole business end of things. And if you want to be a happy camper, you have to understand how all these intertwine.
Yeah.
But the bottom line, and in the interest of this discussion, is that's when I said, okay, if I enjoy being an educator so much, and by the way, just think about this. This happened, I don't know, I'm going to say in April, June maybe. That summer I was invited to Spirit Education. And by the way, you want to hear the craziest story of it all? This guy, my guru, a guy by the name of Al Noor Kasem, he was born in Kenya. Okay. He's Ismaili, which means he comes from the Aga Khan. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's a Muslim division. The Aga Khan, they're like amazing. It's an amazing community. There's a huge community of Ismailis in California for sure. There's a ton in Canada, the Vancouver area. So long story short, this guy, you know, he left Kenya. He went to the UK for his business degree in business education. He immigrated to Canada, started a whole business in Canada. Long story short, you know, I met him, he moved to Mexico, blah, blah, blah. While he was in Kenya, he knew of this guy called Imtiaz Manji, who's also from that place, who's also Ismaili.
Okay.
And when I spoke to him about spirit education, he says, "Oh," he said, "Well, this is this big business that was put together by this guy by the name of Imtiaz." Myself, I know this guy. He's from my community. What?
That is crazy. Small world.
Is it crazy? Anyway, long story short, nothing to it. But bottom line is, my revelation was, okay, I'm an educator. I get an invitation to go to spirit education. I presented that for a summit. They like it. They invite me back. They offer me a position there. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to say is that, you know, the universe conspires when you define who you are and what you want to do.
That's such a big thing for many dentists to get. I think one of the things that you touched on a little bit, but one of the things I talk about is our purpose. And I know our friend Simon Chard, who's on our WhatsApp group, was talking about it this morning too. I had to learn, because I thought my purpose was to be a dentist. Mm-hmm. And this was what brought me to this difficult time in my life, was if I said, okay, I'm a dentist and that's my purpose, then if I fail at doing that, my self-worth means nothing. And so I had to separate that and realize that dentistry can be a passion of mine. It can be my profession, but it's not my purpose. My purpose is to be a father, to be a family man. That's my number one purpose. Mm-hmm. And once I separated that, mm-hmm. I enjoyed dentistry more. I had less stress with it. I could talk to my patients better. But it just came, I had to go through the dirt and go through all of the crap and the stress and depression and everything in order to realize that. But I'm glad that I did, because it put things, like you said, it allowed me to put things in priority, because I was,
Totally.
like you said, I was, speaking at the biggest conferences in the world. I was writing articles in the best journals. And, when I was outside of my home, everybody was telling me how great I was. And then when I came back, I was just, dad, husband, take out the trash, pick up the dog poop. And I had this hard time balancing that.
Okay,
and
let me say, sorry. No,
and
go
then
ahead.
When I realized what was important, I could be who I needed to be when I came home. I didn't, I would come home and expect for everyone to tell me how great I am. And it was like, my ego was out of control.
Totally. So let me tell you, as I hear you out, something that you'll enjoy hearing, which is, and hopefully you'll embrace it as well. And again, I mean, I've seen a couple of names of the people that are listening. I just read a very nice note from a friend of mine from Brazil, Ricardo Kern. I don't know if you know him, but he's following and he's there. Just said, Ricardo, nice story. Just wrote it down. So,
oh yeah,
thank you, Ricardo. So bottom line is, as dentists, we realize that you find stability through tripodizing.
Yeah.
If you think about an occlusion concept is, go back in pathology, we're looking for tripodizing effect. So let me share with you where my tripodizing effect is in life. And because you need those three elements, those three pillars, to make something really, really stable. If you only have two, they have to be very robust, and they have to have like a mating surface that allows them. But if you have three, then there's stability. So, let me tell you something. I love the spotlight. I love presenting. I love the adrenaline of being there. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, showtime. Go out there and conquer an audience.
Yeah.
I love it. And this takes me back to when I wanted to be a musician, and I know you are also wanting to be a musician at some point. So it's the same thing. We are performing, and you have an audience that is there listening. Whether you're playing an instrument or singing, it is the opportunity to connect engage with somebody. And that adrenaline is one of the most addictive of all substances that can, surround your body. So I love that. That's one of my three tripodizing forces. The second one, I love leaving the stage, walking out of the conference center, and I love being invisible. I love that nobody knows who I am in the real world. I mean, some dentists know who I am, but I love being invisible. I love walking into a restaurant and nobody knows who I am, and I can be, I don't need, well, it's not that I don't need to perform anymore. I mean, you are who you are. But, I don't think, I'm very far away from the spotlight. So I get to see somebody else at the spotlight, whether it's a waiter, whether it's somebody eating in front of me, but I don't have the spotlight on. So I love it. That's number 2. Number 3, I love, this is what I love the most, is after living those two energy, mixers, I love walking home and being somebody, but being somebody because is here to care and to listen to the rest of the family and enjoying how everyone, my wife and my kids, take the spotlight. And my job is to be a good listener. And so that's truly where I find that tripodizing energy, when you have these 3 elements that live in my life. And it's crazy because now, we're doing this via live Instagrams, and I've been doing a bunch of webinars the last couple of weeks, and there has been thousands of people. Just the other day in a webinar, man, there were people, I asked people to write where they're coming from. We had people from Malaysia, from Singapore, from Japan, from India, from Israel, from Lebanon, from all Europe, South Africa, Howie's friends were there. I mean, all Latin America, the US. And I was here in my home lecturing to, thousands of people from all over the world. And how crazy is that to have that spotlight But as opposed to, as I told you, I love then walking in the street, being nobody,
Yeah.
and then entering my home. Well, I basically unplugged, went into my room, shut off the light, took 10 deep breaths, and then went to the dining room and sat down for a meal with my family.
Yeah.
How crazy is that, man?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I agree with so much that you said. I've always said that the people that are kind of a celebrity in your very small little group to where you can get recognition for things that you do well, but then you go into the general public and nobody knows who you are. I think that's such a great way of getting that fix. If you're someone like us, right? If you're someone like us who enjoys being on stage, enjoys the connection, the spotlight for a little bit, because I was the same way as you said. I grew up I was a professional dancer and I was a musician, so I was on stage my whole life. I mean, since I was 6, I was on stage. And when I found that I could use dentistry to get me back on stage, and also then once I went from being like a lecturer to an educator, I felt was a big distinction, and I started getting the connection with other dentists. That's what I love so much, and that's what I'm worried about, what may happen with our live lectures, at least, because I enjoy doing webinars and things like this, but there's something so very human about interpersonal communication.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be back
in person.
That's what, I don't think that's going to go away. For sure, it's going to take a hit initially, but that human connection is not only something you seek for as a speaker, but everybody seeks for as an audience. It's having that connection. Listen, this social distancing from somebody like me, us Mexicans, and we like touching. Mexican Jews? Are you kidding? We love touching. So you take that away from me, you mess me up.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping, that eventually things are going to be restored. And we got to think that way.
Yeah.
Right now, there are so many things that are beyond our control. But one of the things that it is within our control is to be as positive, because we are in this upward spiral or a downward spiral. It's a choice. It's a choice. And so I can tell you, I've managed to understand the frequency of the webinar. And by the way, I don't know when we need to wrap up, probably in the next few minutes, but just to tell you, failing, you could pretty much fail at anything. One of my biggest failures as a speaker was the time that Michael Cohen asked me to do a series of webinars.
Okay.
It was my first webinar. I never did one before. To me, I'm an engaging speaker. I love seeing people, and I love taking the pulse of the audience as I see. I look for eye contact, and I take it from there. You take that away from me, you take away everything from me. So talking to the camera without knowing anything, I have my turn to the computer with my camera on. So back then, I invited the country manager for Noble Biocare to come to my office so that he would sit through my webinar in front of me. So I would be like talking to him.
Oh, okay.
And I had like an audience also built into my cubbyhole, if you will.
Yeah.
So I had a few of my staff members and this guy. Long story short, I get this webinar. And by the way, this webinar, the way it was hosted was like this. There were like 5 or 6 different study clubs, Seattle study clubs. And, these guys have like 40, 50 members, 30 members, whatever. And the way that it was done was it was an evening lecture. And so they would go to a hotel, rent out, or a restaurant. They rent out a space, wined and dined, and then I
broadcast you.
Yeah. So people had already a few drinks, and I couldn't see them.
Yeah.
So that right there is like, it sets you for failure. I mean, at least with somebody without the experience that I didn't have. Long story short, I gave it the best way I could. And I remember Heather back then was working at the Seattle Study Club, and I was super, super close with all the network there. So she sends me an email saying, we got the reviews from the feedback, from the webinar. I am afraid they're not that great. And, you know, I look at this email. I'm in the office. 4 operatories are busy with patients. I'm like, torn. Okay, should I open this attachment or not?
Yeah.
So you probably know what I did. And as I said, I had a bunch of patients. This patient that flew in from Vancouver to get some work done. And now she's in the chair, and I'm like, what should I do? Heck, I'm going to go ahead and open the email. So what can I tell you? I've never been hit so hard. And the interesting thing, Kyle, was that I was hit in so many different ways. What people didn't like were different things. And so it's not like they didn't like one thing. Some people complained because my stuff was too basic. Some people complained because my stuff was too advanced. Some people complained because they didn't understand what I was saying. Some people complained because I was being funny. Some people complained about, you know, I was too serious. I mean, you cannot be a Republican and a Democrat. You cannot be white and black, and yet people perceive me as both. In other words, whatever I did didn't rub well to anybody. And so when I read this, I mean, so I saw my patients, and I was done. I came home, and this all just ended up with a nice circle of things. I sit at the dinner table, and I tell my kids were younger back then. This probably has 8 years ago or so. And I told my kids and my wife, says, you know, I got to share something with you. I have failed royally. I have done something so wrong. People thought that I was so bad at what I did that it knocked me out. And I was in my office today, like knockout, like literally when you see a box fight, I was knocked out, Kyle, for minutes. I was like lying on the floor. And I told my kids this. So the only reason why I'm sharing this with you guys is because Daddy is going to come out of this one. But I want you to hear that Daddy can be knocked out. Because if we don't do this, if you only tell Balco what a rock star you are, you're doing a disservice to his education. He's creating an idea of somebody who you're not. And so I told my kids, man, I messed up royally. The other thing that I did was, you know, this was I'm going to say December or November. And in January, there was the big Seattle Study Club Symposium. And it was the 20th anniversary of the Seattle Study Club Symposium. And sure enough, the name of the symposium was 20 Questions for 20 Years. So then after reading those feedback that was so bad, you know, I came back to my war room and I composed an email to Michael, to Heather. I have it somewhere. I mean, I'd love to show you one day that email. I said, okay, I'm going to compose 20 questions of what went wrong, what potentially went wrong. Where's the room for improvement? How can this impact me? So my mind was 100% in question mode, 20 questions. And so, you know, the interesting thing is that had I not gone through that experience, doing webinars today, I would not be, you know, I wouldn't have the ability to connect with people while I'm not looking at them. And there's so many things. In fact, I was telling Adam McWethy, who's our BP, Spear Education's VP on faculty, I said, fuck, you know, I could put a webinar now on how to put a webinar together.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that people need to understand. It is such a different media. And
it's very difficult for speakers, I think, that are used to being in person, you know.
And not only that, I mean, when you do a webinar, when you're done, you feel trashed. It's like your energy, everything is like so focused because you're not seeing. Right now with you, it's a totally different story because I'm seeing you.
Yeah.
This is not a webinar. This is a conversation, and we're sharing this with a beautiful audience.
So is it because of you that now when I do webinars with Seattle Study Club, they show me the club too? Did you start that? Yeah.
You know, when I was there, I didn't see anybody, and I had 5 simultaneous clubs, which is what really hit me hard back then was people from 5 clubs complained. I mean, there was one worse than the other,
right?
But all it takes is one guy, you know, in that study club having drinks saying, hey, I don't agree with this guy. And you cannot hear them back.
Right.
They start having a discussion, and now they hate you.
Yeah.
But again, in all honesty, I don't want to defend my wrongdoing. Clearly, I sucked, because many of these guys, it's interesting. I had conversations with people that you probably know well, Bob Marges and Tao and all these big names in that network. I told them, like, man, I got massively hit. And I was like, this is the end for me as a speaker, the end. And so it's interesting because during that symposium, that 20 question symposium in January, I know there were a couple of directors that, brutally reamed me through feedback sitting in that audience. But I came back, and I came back and I had him. I said, listen, what we do, we can fail. The key is embracing failure and seeing where is the room for improvement. Where can we grow?
Well,
Just to give you an idea.
That's really hard for many dentists, and it was really hard for me, especially early on. And I think because, and I talk about this all the time when I talk about stress, is most of us are overachievers. Most of us are either naturally smart, which isn't me, or work hard, which is me. And so we find a way to get through high school or college or dental school or whatever. We have to do well on our boards and go to residency, etc. And so we're not used to failing. And then so when we do fail, we really take it hard.
Oh man,
Because it's never happened before in so many.
To what degree? Let me just share a few closing remarks, and maybe one day we can do another which is really, really cool. So again, what makes you put a lecture together on something? I mean, you could give a lecture on either a topic in which you feel very strongly about. Mm-hmm. You could even, be a self-proclaimed expert on one field.
Yeah.
You can put a lecture together on a topic that you have no clue anything about it, and yet you want to learn, which is a legit way of doing it. So I had my share of crossover lectures. In other words, I've been lucky enough to been able to be invited to lecture in forums, non-dental forums. In fact, I've been lucky enough to do not one, but 2 TED Talks.
Wow.
And the first TED Talk I did was on communication. And then I felt comfortable talking about that because that's always been my thing. How do I get better at communicating? The second one, though, was something that was in the back of my heart that was messing me up. Now, just to give you a bit more context, and I've been part of Spear Education for the last 3-4 years. So Spear Education is a very robust platform. Now, in the entrance of the building, there's one word, it says Spear. And I happen to lecture side by side with Frank Spear and Greg Kinzer, who, as I said, I mean, he's a guru of an incredible clinician, an incredible speaker. He's so seasoned as a speaker. To me, he's probably one of the true top speakers in the world right now when it comes to interdisciplinary dentistry.
Where's the remote, Valco? Ok, eu tenho, ok? Momentinho, eu vou pegar. Sorry.
That's okay. Long story short, since day one that I've been in Spear Education, every time that we present, there's 300 plus people in the audience, and they fill out an evaluation sheet, on everything. And sure enough, got the names of the speakers, so they are evaluating me side by side with Frank and with Greg. And 300 evaluation sheets. Luckily, most of them are pretty good, but there's always this outlier lecture. I mean, the outlier that says, this guy's better than Spear. Others that say, man, this guy's once I was called the anti-Spear. What the hell does that mean, the anti-Spear?
Oh, that's funny.
So what consistently happened every time that I would look for those reviews, and now that you get a little bit of an idea of who I am and how do I act to these things, when do I read the review? Not when they send me an email a week after of the full reviews. But as I leave the auditorium, I see the stack of reviews and I start eating them up. And so consistently, that 1 or 2 or 3 reviews that, you know, got me here, messed me up for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm not handling this very well. And, you know, Greg would say, hey, Ricky, it's okay. It's normal. It happens to everybody. Don't worry. You know, you'll get over it. I mean, you cannot, you know, let this get to you, blah, 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 blah. And in Spear, we have this division called Customer Success Department. So they dive into these reviews and they look at patterns.
Yeah.
So trust me, if there was anything that was really wrong, I would be out of a job there already a while ago, because they look for this, and you got to look after your customers that are paying a lot of money to listen to these guys. So long story short, I got to work on how these things affect me. What did I do? I was invited to a TED conference. I dove into, you know, behavioral psychology, and I read tons of books. And sure enough, my topic was on the paradox of feedback. And I'm not a guru, but I learned a ton on, you know, what feedback does to you and how feedback either makes you or breaks you.
Yeah.
But more importantly, Kyle, where do we are able, you know, to see that sweet spot where it makes you and doesn't break you. In other words, and I'm gonna end with this quote that I came up with. This is how I end the TED Talk. You know, personal, professional growth stems from learning to live comfortably uncomfortable.
Wow, that's powerful.
And it's something that's worth thinking every day. You know, if you look at my Instagram, you'll notice one trend. And you know, you can do that in everybody's Instagram. We basically show who we are.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one hashtag that I use, and I've been using since I started, you know, Instagramming, is to me the most important ingredient that my everyday needs to have for me to function, which is gratitude. You will see in my posts that I'll hashtag gratitude. Whenever I hashtag,
seen that.
I'll hashtag gratitude. I cannot function. I don't go anywhere without gratitude, because only from gratitude is where you allow to see yourself how lucky you are.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, just yesterday, I'm keep on saying this is going to be my closing remark, but just yesterday, and this is going to be probably as powerful as the one thing that I told you before. Just yesterday, I reached out to somebody that's very dear to me that I hadn't spoken in a while. You know, with lockdown, you tend to reach out to people.
Yeah. And
this is somebody in the business I know very well. And, you know, I called him and I started talking about him, how great this person has been for me, how inspiring he's been for me. I just feel like saying this, you know? And he says, interesting, you know, I was expecting this call some time ago. What do you mean? How so? I mean, now you're giving that type of shit? I mean, why didn't you call me? I mean, I'm just calling you because I want to reach out and say hi.
Yeah.
Oh, he goes, oh, you mean you don't know? Know what? Long story short, 2 months ago, this guy had a robbery. They shot him in the forehead. He lost his sight. He is legally blind now for the last 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And so here I am talking to this guy, watching the sunset. Now, if you look at my last post from yesterday, you will see what it says. So I keep on asking myself, why do I post? Why do I put sunsets? Just take a look at the post. You will see what it says. Well, the answer is very simple. How can I know which is going to be my last post? But if I see a nice sunset, I'm taking a picture and I'm posting it.
Mm.
With that, my friend, I tell you, namaste. And I hope you know what namaste means. It's not a yoga thing. Namaste is something I learned in India.
Okay.
And namaste means, do you know what it means?
No.
Okay, this is going to be probably the biggest pro you'll take from this.
I did my my honeymoon in India though, so we had a good time.
Okay. So namaste means, this is why you put your hands together and say, I see in your eyes a reflection of my soul, and I honor you.
Wow.
All you get is a reflection. That's all you get. Now think about this. When somebody says namaste, it's because you're doing something right. And I hope, and I'm seeing here some of the comments. I see we did some nice connections with some of your members there. I enjoyed it. I want to thank you for having me.
No, thanks for taking the time. I know that you are a busy guy, and I know that you talk about other things outside of dentistry, which I think we need. You know, so that's why I wanted you to show a case just to kind of trick the dentists into coming here. And then you did it exactly and transitioned into what they really need to hear. So I love that.
Awesome.
I love that.
Well, you take care. You keep on doing what you're doing. And
thank you.
Keep enjoying the family, and we'll be in touch, bro.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation again for AO. I really appreciate you thinking about me and
we're gonna make it happen.
Supporting me.
And you know what? You gotta. On that note, let me just say, when you put a program together, I mean, you want to have the people in the podium that you want to hear,
right?
Because if they're good for you, they're good for the audience.
Right.
And so that's why I wanted to hear you, and I'm looking forward to hearing that lecture, because I'm pretty sure you have some powerful pointers for everybody. And and this is what we do, and we just make this a bigger place and a better place for everybody.
Yeah, you definitely are. Well, thanks so much for being a leader in our field, and you know, mentoring so many young dentists. You're really making a difference. So I appreciate that, and thanks for all the tips. I'm excited to go back and watch this again.
Awesome. Can you?
I learned a lot. Yeah, so I'll put it up. For 24 hours, and then I'll put it on my website afterwards, so anyone can go and watch there.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
And maybe I'll throw it on YouTube too or something.
Well, you take care. It was fun.
Okay, muchas gracias. Ciao.
Gracias, hermano. Ciao.